Hey guys, welcome to another episode of AB in the Films. Guys, you know exactly what this is. We're going to get right into it in just a minute. But first, a few things. Number one, this is now a top 20. This is no longer a top 15. Because, to be honest, this was extremely hard for me to do this. I mean, I could have done a top 200 films, okay? This was so hard to get all my favorite movies down to just 20. Number two, these are not the best films that are known to people. These are my favorite films. Like, these are basically the movies where I would just dread if they didn't exist. I would be so upset if they were just banned from society. Okay, these are the top 20 I love. And you'll find out what number one is. These are in a certain order. I'm not just throwing them out there. They're in an order for a reason. So, let's get right into it. This is AB's top 20 favorite films. Superbad. Now here's the deal. I saw Superbad in the movie theaters when it first came out, and I remember walking into this movie not knowing what it was going to be about at all. I had no idea. The only thing I knew was that it starred these two teenagers, this one awkward teenager with a fake ID, and that was it. The only reason I went to go see this movie was because it said, you know, coming this summer from the guy that brought you Knocked Up and the 40-Year-Old Virgin. I saw Knocked Up, and I laughed my ass off, and I said, you know what, I gotta go see this movie. It looks really funny. The trailer didn't quite, you know, make me want to go see it. It's just that it said, from the guy who brought you Knocked Up, and I said, okay, I'm going to see this movie. And I went to go see it, and I have never heard an audience laugh so hard in the movie theaters in my life. I have never heard that before. Jonah Hill, Michael Cera, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, I think that's how you pronounce the guy's name. I don't know. Maybe it's Plus. I don't know. But just memorable characters, really great writing in this movie, so much comedy. Yeah, it's a lot of cursing, it's a lot of sex, drugs, teen partying. Like, the whole movie are these three guys trying to get alcohol for a party. But other than that, unless you've been living under a rock, if you have not seen this movie, do yourself a favor and check this movie out. Look, all I know is this. Whenever a cop pulls me over, I'm just going to show him my real ID. Beetlejuice. 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 Okay, nothing happened. This is going to be one of my favorite Tim Burton movies because, well, this was the first film that introduced me to Tim Burton. James and the Giant Peach does not count. Tim Burton did not direct that. He directed this film. And I gotta say, I loved imitating Michael Keaton as a kid. I remember talking in that scratchy voice, you know, it's showtime, everybody, oh yeah. You know, something like that, you know? But, like, this movie has everything. Like, to me, this film defines who Tim Burton is. A lot of people say it's either Ed Wood or Edward Scissorhands or Nightmare Before Christmas. That was his best work. No, for me, it's Beetlejuice. Because this has what a Tim Burton film should have. Dark comedy, crazy characters, but interesting at the same time, and basically skeletons and Halloween crap. That's what this movie is. That's what it has. And it's so funny at times. I don't know why this movie didn't do well when it first came out. Well, I can kind of see why. I mean, Siskel and Ebert didn't like it when it first came out. But, I gotta say, I remember watching this movie when I was a kid, growing up in the 90s. I used to watch it all the time on the old VHS tapes that we used to have. I do not own this movie, but I can't wait till next year, because next year the movie turns 25 years old, and Warner Brothers better release some sort of 2-disc, you know, collector's edition thing, because I'd love to own that movie with extras on it. But yeah, Beetlejuice is definitely deserves the number 19 spot. It's one of my favorite Tim Burton films, and, you know, I don't watch it every Halloween. In fact, I just saw it earlier today. Horrible Bosses. Now, I came across this trailer on YouTube, and I just thought this movie was a riot. I had only seen it, you know, come to think of it, I haven't seen many advertisements for this movie in the theaters, like, during the previews. Like, I hardly ever saw it. Maybe once or twice, but that was after I saw it on YouTube. But I gotta say, first of all, do not judge me on this. I've only seen one episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I'm not a big fan of the show. I think I might be, considering the episode I saw. But, like, this movie is definitely deserves the number 19 spot. It's one of my favorite Tim Burton films, and, you know, I don't watch it every Halloween. In fact, I just saw it earlier today. Horrible Bosses. Now, I came across this trailer on YouTube, and I just thought this movie was a riot. I had only seen it, you know, I think I might be, considering the episode I saw. But, you know, Charlie Day, Jason Sudeikis, Jason Bateman, the fact that they're trying to kill their bosses, first of all, this is something that everyone can relate to, because we've all had a boss that we can't take. And we've all asked ourselves this question. We don't do it, but we've always asked, like, I wonder what my life would be like if my boss wasn't around. I mean, that's really funny. And these three guys, what they're doing is everything what a person who isn't a murderer should be doing. Because they're thinking about Law and Order, they're thinking about CSI, you know, fingerprints and all this stuff. This is what people who aren't murderers think about when they try to commit a murder. This is what they think about, and it's so funny. I will admit, Charlie Day, he delivers the best lines in the movie, along with Jason Sudeikis. Jason Bateman really doesn't have anything to do in this movie. Kevin Spacey is just doing his shtick that he did from an old movie called Swimming with Sharks. Now watch that movie and tell me there's a difference. Jennifer Aniston, she completely throws herself into the role, and I give her full credit on that, because for once, she's not playing Jennifer Aniston. And, you know, basically this is just a really good comedy. It's gotta be the best comedy, because not everybody was looking forward to this, because everyone was looking forward to Hangover Part 2. And when that came out and that didn't do as well when everybody thought it was going to, they had something to fall back on, Horrible Bosses, and it delivers. Every scene in this movie is funny. I won't give anything away, but I love the scene with Charlie Day in the car when Bateman and Sudeikis go into Kevin Spacey's house. I love the scenes with Charlie Day in the car. He is so funny on that. If you haven't seen this movie, do yourself a favor, check this movie out. This is one of the funniest comedies I've seen in a long time. In fact, since Superbad, I think this is one of the funniest comedies. So yeah, that deserves the number 18 spot. And on to the next movie. Back to the Future. Okay, yeah, obviously everyone has to put this on their list, but to be honest with you, I'm not a big science fiction guy. I'm not that big on comic books, I'm not that big on, you know, sci-fi, adventure, fantasy, Star Wars, Star Trek. I'm not really that into it. E.T. and Close Encounters I can get into. Back to the Future I can get into, but for one reason. The comedy. There is so much comedy in this movie, okay? Michael J. Fox is a teenager. He grows up in the 80s. He goes back in time to the 50s, and he comes across his parents when they were kids. But what I love so much about this movie is, how I can't really come up with a word, but he's so, oblivious to the timeline and how to screw up things in the timeline. I mean, he goes back into the 50s and he's talking about, you know, John F. Kennedy and Vietnam and all these things that aren't supposed to happen for another 10, 20 years. And nobody knows what he's talking about and they think he's insane. The DeLorean, the car he's driving, no one's got a car like that. Ronald Reagan was president in the 80s. He was an actor in the 50s. You know, all this stuff. It's just so interesting. Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis, they never seem to let me down. Bob Zemeckis, this is the guy who did Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Castaway, The Polar Express. This guy's a brilliant director. I love every one of his movies. Steven Spielberg, yeah, he's the executive producer, but I don't see this movie under his belt. No. If he directed it, it's under his belt, okay? Because Spielberg, he's got enough hits already. Doc Brown, one of the most memorable and funny characters in any science fiction movie I've ever seen. Of course, the DeLorean is like a character itself in the movie. I'm sorry, the franchise, as I should say. And one more thing about this movie. I have a rule to myself that if I'm going to talk about a movie, I have to talk about the sequels. So here's what I think about the sequels. Back to the Future Part 2. If you're going to watch the second one, you have to watch the first one because it intertwines with the first one. And it is extremely confusing, okay? And there's a lot of noise going on and you don't really care too much about what's going on. I don't know. I mean, Back to the Future Part 2, it's okay. I wouldn't watch again. The first one I would definitely watch. And the third one, they basically redid what they did in the first one. Pop culture references. You know, the stuff that Marty McFly knows from the 80s. Now he's just bringing it back again. You know, just what he did in the first one when he went back in time 30 years ago. And plus it's a Western. Like I've said this before, I'm not big on Western movies. Unless John Wayne is in them. If John Wayne is in them, then I will watch it. But other than that, not a big fan of Part 2 and Part 3. I think the first one deserves a viewing. It's great. Yeah, next movie. Air Force One. This is a movie where you got the president being hijacked by terrorists on Air Force One. Okay, I guess that could be a movie. So, who's in it? Well, you got Harrison Ford as the president, you got Gary Oldman as the terrorist, you got Glenn Close as the vice president, and you got Wolfgang Petersen as the director. Okay, we have a good movie. But still, Air Force One is definitely good. There's a lot of explosions, there's a lot of action. I mean, it's Harrison Ford as the president being captured by Gary Oldman. Okay, who wouldn't see that? Now, I will say this. There are a lot of corny moments in here. The ending is a bit of a letdown for me. Those of you who have seen this movie, you know obviously what happens. I'm not going to say anything. To those of you who have not seen it, and to those of you who haven't even heard of it, do not let the ending prevent you from seeing this movie. This is definitely a must-see. You should see this movie. I don't know what that was. I heard something dinging upstairs. Alright, anyway, Air Force One is definitely worth seeing. This is a great movie. I love every minute of it. I love the beginning. It's got a good setup. The middle's really good between Harrison Ford and Gary Oldman. The ending, bit of a letdown, but definitely check this movie out. And this is it for part 1, and I will see you guys in part 2. So this is movies 20 through 15, and enjoy 14 up in the rest of the parts. Take care, guys.